What's going on, guys? It's Dan here from the Wolfpack, joined today for the first time on his debut. Let's hear it for Benjamin Jones. How you doing, mate?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing good, doing good. We are obviously covering all of the USA friendlies, reviewing what happened, going over what went well, what needs improving, standout players, and how we think Wolves will play next season under Gary O'Neill with the things that we've been witnessing. So stick around. Just going to give you a quick intro, and we'll be right back. All right, guys. So before we get started, make sure whatever you're watching this on, you're supporting us in any way possible, liking videos, subscribing to our YouTube, sharing it with your friends. You know, all of the things basically that helps us along the way. So Ben, you saw your debut. Buzzing to get you on. To be fair, mate, because we've been talking on the chat for God knows how long. It's the first time we've met and everything. Actually, really excited to hear your thoughts about what's been a pretty good pre-season.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I'm very excited as well. I think, just I've been a Wolves fan for the longest amount of time, but I've never sort of had the opportunity to just discuss it or talk about it in this sort of way. So, yeah,
Amazing.
really excited to be on board.
All right, wicked, cool. So we went over a little bit at the start of the video about what we're going to get into. So I think we should just get straight onto it. So the first game in the Wolves preseason in the USA tour was the West Ham game, which Wolves won 3-1. And it's actually a really good performance. And I think it was a performance that surprised a lot of us. I did watch-alongs for two of the three. Couldn't do the last one, unfortunately, due to family stuff. But for the first one, I was very, very pleasantly surprised because I thought West Ham under Lopetegui, would really test Wolves. But I actually thought, we stayed really, really resolved. We kind of always knew what we were doing. I was really happy with the press. So when we talk about sort of what went well in this specific game, I think from the off, Wolves pressed really, really well and made it really hard for West Ham to get any rhythm at all. And ultimately, that's what led to the first goal, wasn't it, Ben?
Yeah. No, I think the thing that surprised me about that game was sort of the pattern of the sort of pre-season in the USA was that it sort of transitioned from the emphasis being on fitness and sort of just the players gelling together to more like more tactics being thrown at them. So I think for that game, it sort of caught me off guard how well structured they'd been in terms of press, in terms of combinations, and I think that's a real testament to Gary O'Neill, testament to the players for sort of working so hard, and the effectiveness of the Marbella camp. Just think, all those things just caught me off guard. But yeah, really surprised, really happy.
So as I said, it led to that Cunha goal. The press was fantastic. And we didn't really see that too much. I can't remember us winning the ball that high last season. Like, we're at the corner flag, essentially. It's a bit of a lost cause normally. Normally we've got our defensive situation locked in and we're just waiting for them to come at us. But we didn't really allow them any time to do that. I think it was Sarabia that pounced onto a loose pass, which led to Strand Larsen being sort of keeping the ball in, basically, and then threading a really intelligent pass through the mouth of the goal, and then Cunha sticks it in, and it's 1-0. And what I really liked about it was the fact that Wolves were rewarded for something that they'd obviously been working on in training, because we'd seen it from the first whistle that they were going to press, West Ham up wide and make it really awkward for them to play, and that's what led to the goal. So that I was really really impressed with that. To be fair,
Yeah,
so after that, very much just I thought Wolves controlled the game really well. Obviously, West Ham go to score just before half time, but what I was really impressed with is, I mean, it took them a decent chunk of time for them to get the equaliser, but it was more of a mistake, wasn't it, Ben? It wasn't like it was a bit of a lapse in concentration from Ait Nouri. Probably should have got a little bit tighter to Kudos, and Kudos finishes it underneath Bentley at his near post, and Bentley probably should have done better as well. So I think ultimately that first half, even though that goal we did concede that goal, I thought that we basically nullified them to
yeah,
basically nothing, which was really really impressive. What do you think, Ben, about us obviously starting as a four, as a back four? What do you think of that basically? Because that was a bit of a surprise for some, not for myself, because I was very much made aware that was Gary O'Neill's plans going forward. He was going to line up as a back four, but do you think it? Do you think we, held a line well?
yeah. I think in that game, yeah, it really surprised a lot of fans how well we did in a four because I think for me, any time we've tried since coming back to the Premier League, tried to implement a four, it just hasn't been successful. We've let in a lot of sloppy goals, but I think this is probably first genuine preseason since returning to the Premier League where we've tried, like we've gone into the preseason saying we're going to implement a
Mm,
back four and we're going
mm,
to stick to it. And I think, I mean, the only sort of exception to that was under Lopetegui. Obviously, that last summer that was a very strange set of circumstances. But
mm.
um, the plan going into that United game was we're going to play a 4-4-2. We're going to play this way. All
Yeah.
the preparation you saw throughout the preseason, especially in the was it the Rennes game? I think when we
Mm,
beat Rennes 4-0, the clear pattern was 4-4-2.
mm,
Um, but as soon as a string of bad results in the Premier League, Gary O'Neill switched
mm,
back to the five. So I think I'm probably in the same boat as you. I wasn't surprised that Gary O'Neill would try to implement it, but I'm pleasantly surprised by how effective I think it's been. And that's
mm.
probably testament down to Strand Larson, I would say, because for the longest time since obviously Raul's injury, we haven't had a proper out and out number nine. And I think
Mm.
so many fans link that to goals, assists, and of course he'll bring that as we'll probably go on to discuss later. But I think in terms of leading the line, it's also about the press, and I think
Yeah,
that links to what we were talking about earlier in terms of you know the hard work, the structure, and I think
yeah.
so much of that has to go down to Larson in terms of his ability to sort of see the defender, spot a weakness, and
Mm.
he's just on it. And I think, yeah, that's something to look forward to this season.
Definitely, yeah. I think you've alluded quite well there into some of the standouts, which we'll talk about later. But yeah, so Kudos gets that goal. It goes into a half time. We then go into the second half, and I actually thought West Ham turned on the gears a little bit, and tested Wolves a little bit. But what I liked was we stayed quite resolved about it. Didn't really, you know, give them too many opportunities. There was a few scares here and there, but I thought what I was really impressed with, which was what we were just talking about, the back four, was the fact that you've got Totti and Mascara in a back two for centre backs, and I just thought that we had so much more pace. Like
Yeah,
if a ball came over the top or whatever, it was pretty much dealt with. And that was really the only way they could have hurt us, because I felt like Ait Nouri kept his width well, and pretty much just made it so that essentially it was his side and they'd have to go elsewhere. And what I was really impressed with as well is our attacking players got back to help out as well,
yeah,
to win the ball, and that was obviously the necessary route to the game, was to win the ball as soon as possible, as high as possible, and obviously those things led to even more goals because we're going to talk about standout players later, and I don't think it's going to be tricky to not talk about him now because Rodrigo Gomez gets our next 2 goals,
Yeah.
both in the 72nd and the 77th minute. The 72nd minute is a pretty intelligent bit of play from Bellegarde in the middle, sort of wins the ball nicely, gets us up the pitch, and we saw that a little bit. His first game against Liverpool when he played in the as a centre role instead
Yeah.
of a wide role, and that's another thing I'm quite excited about. What do you think about Bellegarde, Ben?
So I think last season, I think because I'm someone who watches quite a lot of football in general, Bellegarde was someone who, like, I'm not going to pretend I knew everything about him, but he was
Mm.
definitely a player I was aware of. And I think when initially we were linked with him, I remember seeing a stat that he was it was in one of the highest percentiles for sort of ball carrying,
Yeah,
um,
yeah.
just in the world. And I think for me that excited me because the midfield at the time, didn't have too many progressive players.
We lost
Or
Matheus Nunes as well, didn't we?
yeah,
So it was almost like a like and like, and I thought that's where he'd end up playing, but
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Sorry,
But I
carry on.
think but yeah. So that's why I'm really excited for him this season because due to injuries and various setbacks last season in terms of his red card, obviously, and it just hasn't come off for him. And I think
Mm,
everyone can see how talented he is as a player, like you
mm.
said in the Liverpool game. So I think we shouldn't get too carried away. I think some people did get a bit carried away in terms of after his debut, but I think
Mm.
there's definitely a player in there, and I think I definitely trust Gary O'Neill to get the best out of him.
I think when you play your players wide and you ultimately try and get those to be the players that get you up the pitch, you've got to have the skills of like a Pedro Neto,
Yeah,
someone who can just turn on the gas straight away. And I don't think Bellegarde's one of those players. I think he's more of a kind of like a Jota, really. Like he'll sort of bruise between players. He'll get like really tight to different players and wiggle his way through. And I think playing him wide really was just not really helping his game. And ultimately, that is what caused the goal for Rodrigo Gomez for his first goal because a bit of intelligent play from Bellegarde gets it happily past the West Ham defenders to find Gonzalo Guedes, which was very, very interesting. I don't think anybody would have said that we'd have seen Gonzalo Guedes in a Wolves shirt. And we're going to go over players in general at the end. But he really, really created that first goal for Rodrigo Gomez. And what I was really, really impressed with is we didn't stop running. And even the follow up for obviously the goal for Rodrigo Gomez, if he doesn't keep running with Guedes, he's not getting to that ball. And last season, I think we were trying to rely too heavily on certain players getting forward and not following up on second chances. And what was really refreshing is we've seen that a couple of times now. Obviously, we're going to talk about the other games in a minute. And it's not just this game that's happened, is it, Ben, where players have followed up on a spilled ball or a loose ball or a second ball, and that's led to a goal.
no, well, yeah, we'll get onto Guedes a bit more later, but I think in terms of his attitude for that goal, you can see it. The ball's played through by Bellegarde. He chases it full pace. You can see how hard he's trying to get there. Beautiful bit of defending by Aguerd. And
Mm,
Gomez sees the poor positioning by Zuma. You can't,
mm,
obviously, I've seen a lot of West Ham fans digging into Zuma for his positioning. But on the
mm,
plus side, from a Wolves perspective, Gomez has to, sort of capitalise on that.
mm,
Gets to the back post, which Gary O'Neill has talked about him in training in terms of his work ethic, but also his
mm.
positioning. And if he's not there taking advantage of the space that Zuma leaves behind at the back post, we don't score. So I think, yeah, that's testament to his hard work. Also, Guedes, who deserves a lot of credit. On sort of the list of goals and assists in the preseason, I've given the assist to him. Whether the
Mm.
last touch comes off him or not, I'm not sure, but he definitely
Mm.
deserves credit for the assist, I think.
Well, yeah, because it's driving runs, and we saw that last season how much Gary loves players that can run and get you up the pitch in Cunha and what have you. But I just think that was a bit of a bit like I said, very refreshing to see a player follow up on opportunities and stuff. Because I feel like if we were looking at last season, what would have happened ultimately is that would just basically come to nothing. It would have been a great tackle. The goalkeeper would have come out and collected the ball, and no one else would have followed up on the opportunity. I think
Yeah,
I've seen so many opportunities where the ball's spilled and no one's been wise enough to it. They've always just thought, oh, it's just gonna go back to them, and we're gonna have to defend. And that just comes from positiveness. That just comes from being positive. And I think you really have to say that Gary and the coaches and everyone in the background, that's what it's all about from him. I think is he doesn't give me this manager that gets a lot of pressure on players. Seems to give them a lot of freedom, and if it doesn't work out, then he tells them why and says, you know what, you're doing a little bit too much there. Like Ryan Ain't Nori, for example. Like, I love that about Gary O'Neill, and I think that's where that goal's come from, because he's given the opportunity for a young kid in Rodrigo Gomez to have the freedom to be in some space to finish off a chance like that. So that is Rodrigo Gomez's first goal, and then Rodrigo Gomez's second goal is all about a lovely bit of interplay from a young kid called Pedro Lima. We're going to talk about standout players in a minute. He's definitely one of them. But that cross for Rodrigo Gomez's third goal is an absolute peach. Honest to God, like, it's one of those crosses that if you miss that opportunity, then people are just going to give you pelters forever, because you could literally just put any body part on that, and then it's in, isn't it? So, what did you think about that third goal?
yeah. I think we'll get onto it more later, but that's definitely the second best piece of interplay that we've seen so far. Obviously, we'll get onto the Leipzig
Mm,
game later, but I definitely think Pedro Lima for me has so much potential. I think
mm,
his biggest asset, like he's got all the skill, he's got all the ability beyond his years, but I think his best attribute is his maturity.
mm,
It's we've spoke about hard work. We know how important that is to Gary O'Neill in terms of work rate, in terms of positioning intelligence, and he's
mm,
got the lot. So I think this Premier League season, I'm very excited to see how he sort of develops, because I think the fans, we know how fans can be in terms of fickleness, in terms of getting on players' backs. But I think in terms of a young player who's just moved with all the talent, the work rate, I can't see. Well, I can see the fan base giving him sort of some leeway in terms of
mm,
mistakes, in terms of he might have the odd bad performance. I don't expect him to
yeah.
hit the ground running necessarily, but I think given what we've seen from him in pre-season, he's definitely got, um, you know, in terms of the fans, in terms of complaining, in terms of moaning, I
Mm.
definitely think he's got sort of a barrier to protect him a bit, I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. Super mature for his age, for sure. So that was the West Ham game. It ended, obviously, Wolves 3, West Ham 1. And I honestly thought that it was a good day. It was a good day out for Wolves, to be fair. I honestly thought I expected a lot more from West Ham. Obviously, it's a pre-season game. You're probably going to see a completely different West Ham side and what have you. And we're saying that for all of the games that we're talking about. But the main takeaway is Wolves' game plan from the off paid off, and it worked. And we saw some really, really intelligent play from different players. We saw some players playing better than they ever have. So it's just very, very positive. So we'll move on now to the Palace game. So obviously this game we actually lost 3-1. But before we even get onto it, if you didn't watch this game, or you're not sure about this game and you're looking at that and it's 3-1, you're probably thinking, you know, wow, that's an awful result really for Wolves, and it does look like that. But in terms of how we played, yeah, okay, we probably weren't as good as we were against West Ham or whatever. But in terms of a pre-season game, what we did get to see was some more players. So it started a completely different lineup. Obviously, some players held their positions, but we saw a completely different back four with Santi Bueno and Craig Dawson at the back instead. And ultimately, we also saw some weaknesses in some of the players, and that's kind of what led to the result. But let's talk about what went well in the game. So obviously, Palace did really well to win 3-1. Scored some decent goals, but all of the goals really, Ben, they could have been avoided. Do you agree?
I totally agree. I think everything you said about the West Ham goal in the previous friendly could be said about these goals. I think they were all poor moments. I think they were all poor, judgment from keeper, from a player going one on one. I think they were all moments. And now you
Mm,
can't sort of, given for a lot of goals we conceded last season, you can't use moments as an excuse, because at the end of the day, the result's what matters. I think.
mm,
Obviously, it's a preseason friendly, so that's not so much the case. But I think in terms of that, it does mitigate, I think, the fact that
mm,
they were all poor moments. It wasn't sort of a consistent, you know, Palace are at us, we've conceded. It was
mm.
more, we were either even with Palace or we were on top. And I think there was no sort of sustained period where Palace sort of threatened over and over and over again.
Mm.
That's what I'd say.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, the accidents that you say, the goals that we conceded, they were just very silly mistakes. That in the Premier League you're going to get punished on those kind of mistakes, and I said this in my live as well. I said, you know what? If you're going to make mistakes, make them in pre-season, so you can analyze them back home and go, all right, we slipped on a banana skin there. Let's get rid of that. You know what I mean? Let's sort that out. Sorry about that. My camera went off for some reason. There we go.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. So like I said, the mistakes, if you're gonna make them happen in preseason, and then iron them out. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Because ultimately, then they probably won't happen so much
yeah,
in a proper game of football, because you've already addressed what could happen in that situation. So I actually took these little things as a bit of a positive, because what it did for me is it made me look at Totti Gomez and Mosquera in a completely different light. Like, I already thought they'd had an incredible performance against West Ham, but it made me think, okay, Santi Bueno and Dawson are two very, very different choices. Slow on the turn. I think Santi Bueno's got a little bit more pace than he makes out, to be fair, but he's a little bit clumsy in his positioning sometimes. I don't think Santi Bueno was as bad as Dawson, in my opinion. I don't think Dawson's quite fit as well. So
yeah,
it's one of those things that um, it's just a bit of a freak sort of moment, really, where you've caught a defender that's only just getting back from fitness, and a defender that's not really had too many minutes and pretty much no minutes in a back four. So
yeah,
really, we probably did well to only concede three, to be honest.
yeah.
Um, and obviously, another thing we've got to talk about is obviously Saar wasn't here at that point, and we've obviously gone over the fact that if Saar gets injured, our two other keepers, for me, aren't Premier League goalkeepers. And that was proven in this game. I know we talk about pre-season and we sort of let them off for that, but I can't really think of too many performances in a Premier League match where I've been extremely confident with Bentley or King.
No, I think the one positive game I've seen of Bentley, I think, is it was the Arsenal game. I think we were losing. I can't remember the score. I can't remember when he came on, but I
Saar went
remember
off, didn't he?
Sarr came off injured and Bentley came on, and I thought he was very good.
Mm.
But I think the moment for me when I knew Bentley just wasn't probably the standard we need was Ipswich last season. Obviously, I
Yeah,
think that was Santi's debut as well, so that
yeah,
mitigates it. But I think all the goals we conceded were down to poor, just lapses of judgment going under the keeper. And that
yeah.
seems to be quite a pattern with Bentley. Because I remember, I can't remember what game it was, but I remember an opposition manager saying um, in the lead up to the game, we told the boys to, as soon as you get the ball, hit it hard and low as soon as you can. And that's
Mm,
sort of his weakness. And I think
mm.
we've
His
seen that.
reactions,
Yeah.
his reactions aren't the fastest. They're not as good
Yeah.
as Saar's.
Yeah.
But I do think with his feet, I know that obviously he made some bad moments happen in this Palace game, but we're going to talk about the next game in just a second. I have seen some good things from his perspective as a sweeper keeper. I think he's got some good feet on him to be able to get rid of the ball, but ultimately his reactions and his shot stopping aren't up to scratch for me.
No.
I do think as well there's a mistake in him based upon what he's got in front of him. Because when you saw Mascara and Totti in front of him, and they've got a lot more pace to get back and help him out in a situation, I think he can sort of not stress so much. I think when he's got Dawson and Bueno in front of him, he's thinking, "Oh, I'm gonna have to run out and get to that ball," and that is what led to Schlupp's first goal.
Yeah.
Because he's come out not really had any confidence in his two centre backs, and instead of clearing the ball straight down the field, he's giving it to Schlupp, and Schlupp's put it into an empty net, and it's a good finish to be fair. It's top
Yeah.
bins pretty much. So yeah, I think that I'm not going to talk about too much about the game because there's not really too many positives you could say, other than the fact that when we put some better players on, some more experienced sort of players that gel a little bit more together, we did start to see a bit of a performance, and it just left it too late. In my opinion, I think that the substitutions could have happened a bit sooner,
Yeah.
because we saw that they had a massive impact, which led to Santi Bueno scoring and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's not really lots to really talk about positive wise for that. But in
Yeah.
terms
I
of
mean,
what needs improving, Ben, what do you think
yeah.
needs improving in?
Yeah, I think I just want to caveat. I think I disagree slightly. I think there were some positives to the game in terms of I thought, especially in the first third, I
Mm,
thought Guedes and Gomez did have a very
mm,
good sort of connection. Obviously, never played together apart from in
yeah.
training. Maybe against Bristol, I think in a
Mm,
previous friendly they may have played with each other. But I think
yeah.
that their link up in terms of we've said it before, Guedes in terms of his attitude,
Mm,
Gomez getting to the, in the right positions in the box. I thought really good link up could have easily ended up in two goals. There was the first one where he just Guedes just breezed past
mm,
Tyreek Mitchell, I think it was. He breezed past him,
mm,
laid it on a plate, and I think Gomez has to score that. But
mm. I
obviously
think
it's just
Pedro Lima as well had some good spells as well.
yeah. Oh yeah,
Um,
and he scored the two offside goals as well, didn't he?
Disallowed goals, yeah. And I think in another, you get VAR involved in one of those, and I think it's probably not offside, but
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I think that the score line very much, you know, it's one of those really. You look at it, it looks worse than it is.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think I agree with you. To be fair, Ben, there are some positives there for sure, and I think that's ultimately what led to the next game,
Yeah.
um, which was RB Leipzig. And I've got to say, when I saw the fact that we were going to be playing RB Leipzig after not winning a game for God knows how long in the Premier League, I was thinking about we're probably going to get pretty battered. To be honest,
Yeah.
they're a very very good side in the Bundesliga, and I thought they'd play to Wolves' weaknesses a little bit more than they did.
Yeah.
I actually think they played to our strengths, to be honest. But yeah, the game ended Wolves 3, RB Leipzig nil. Um, which is absolutely amazing. I mean, this is a team that's in the Champions League, and they're number 9, scoring goals for fun last season,
Yeah, they
and
also
some of
beat
the
Villa. Yeah, they also beat Villa 2-0 as well in their previous game. I know that
exactly, yeah.
they rotated quite a bit as well, but that's still
Mm.
something to mention.
And some of their patterns of play, like I was watching them a little bit to sort of warm up to the game, and I thought some of their patterns of play. I mean, they are a really, really good side to watch. So I was a little bit surprised, really, that we could turn them over as easy as we did. And I actually think this was basically a complete Wolves performance. Um, I can't think of many times in the game where I saw something so wrong that I could even think about something that would need improving, because I feel like that it would just be nitpicking at that point.
Yeah,
But in terms of obviously what went well, it's got it down here as Sarabia 2 goals, but
yeah,
definitely
that's
wasn't.
not. No, definitely not.
uh, yeah, let's talk about the goals, because that was obviously a really good part of what went well. Um, so Sarabia gets 3. It's a breakaway goal. Lamina wins the ball with a beautiful tackle, curves around the player, hits the ball out, finds Bellegarde. Bellegarde again getting really, really into lovely positions with the load of grass in front of him and just absolutely driving at RB Leipzig. Finds Doherty out wide. Doherty plays the ball. And I actually thought he played it too far wide, but actually finds Sarabia in a free spot. No one's around him. He's got quite a lot to do, to be fair, Sarabia, and he does really well at least just connecting to the ball. And it takes a huge deflection, and it's 100% an own goal.
Yeah,
But taking absolutely nothing away from that move, what was very, very impressive is we saw another style of play from Wolves, which is counter-attacking, Ben.
yeah. I think one pattern of play which was very repeated during the game was sort of overloading on one side to then switch to the other. And I think it wasn't so much evident with that goal in terms of the initial
Mm,
phase, because I think they played it around. We saw sort of Eight Nori dropping into more of a not left centre back role, but it was definitely a lot more sort of further back than we've seen him last season.
yeah.
But I think a lot of one of the main features was playing it around the back, sort of between Totti, Eight Nuri, Kwang at times, Bellegarde. You make that triangle, you overload on that side to then play out to the other side into space.
Mm,
Obviously, it didn't quite work out that way, but we managed to sort of play around in that sort of area of the pitch.
mm,
Played over to Doherty, who, fair play to him, had the pace to sort of move up the pitch, because I think last season he wasn't sort of the most attacking threat. He was quite reserved at
mm,
times, I thought, apart from maybe the Chelsea game.
yeah.
But he managed to bomb down the right.
Mm,
I don't think I could say whether he meant the cross or not, whether it was an
mm,
overhit cross. Like, if
mm.
he did mean to pick out Sarabia, all credit to him.
The only thing
Sarabia,
I could say
yeah,
is, sorry, Ben. The only thing I could say is I think they have been working on trying to reach the far post, because
yeah,
we've seen Rodrigo Gomez score, a couple of goals in that sort of pattern of play. I think if you approach that sort of pattern of play and you try and aim too far central into the 6 yard box, keeper either gets it, or you've got so many centre backs who are just towering over, you know, everybody that's in the box. That really, Sarabi is probably the best option, isn't he? Because he's the one that's
yeah,
free running in.
yeah. I definitely agree. And then he does, everything right. He hits it hard and low.
Mm,
Obviously, it's going wide, but then
mm,
when you hit it into that area, there's always the chance
yeah,
it will take a nick, and obviously it did.
which we don't do enough either. To be honest, we don't shoot enough at goal to create any sort of deflectional sort of opportunities. And that's another thing that we did that we could take into the next Arsenal game. Do you know what I mean? That could be a way we hurt Arsenal on the counter. Do you know what I mean? If we do keep getting Neto into that space. I mean, there's so many opportunities where something could happen like that, basically. So I think that's what we're trying to talk about. If you're still keeping involved in this video and everything, that's what we're trying to talk about. It's not just assessing what Wolves did really well or what they didn't do well, but it's also what we're thinking is going to be stand out to how Wolves will play in the Premier League. So I
Yeah,
think you think about teams that a counter attacking sort of system will help. Arsenal's probably going to be that, isn't it? To be honest, like we're probably, if we're going to score against Arsenal, it's probably going to be a goal like that, where
yeah,
you break away really fast and capitalize on space that Arsenal leave from being too far forward.
yeah. Yeah, I think
Um,
a feature that's sort of been, we saw it most clearly in that game, but I think we've seen in sort of training and previous friendlies was just the idea that obviously we start off as a four on
mm,
paper, but sort of
mm,
when we're attacking, it becomes a three in whatever shape that takes. So,
yeah,
at times we saw Lamina dropping in. At
yeah,
times, obviously, when he came off, Doyle was dropping in.
exactly,
Murray
yeah,
dropped in, and it freed up. It just frees up a player that obviously when you're starting a four, the forward players know who they're pressing. But when you
mm,
change into a three and you free someone up, that
mm,
can really disrupt a team's press. And I think we did
yeah.
that really effectively in that game.
I think the fact that we play so many triangles as well, if you get an extra player that's cutting deep, you're essentially creating more of a passing you're another solution basically for your centre backs to look forward, because the amount of times last season where our centre backs would get it, play an absolute suicide ball into midfield, lose the ball, and then all of a sudden that's either led to a chance or a goal. I think if your DM's coming towards you, it's giving you that opportunity, isn't it? Giving you that breathing space to
Yeah,
sort of make something of it. And I don't think we did that enough against Palace, but against West Ham and Leipzig, I think Lamina did an absolute stellar job at that. So that's something we'll probably see again as well. If we're playing a
yeah,
back four, the DM will probably come back into the two centre backs and make it a bit of a three to give it a little bit of more options and everything. So yeah,
yeah,
good point. To be fair, Ben. Yeah,
yeah. I definitely think we need to give so much credit to Larson over the course of that whole game. I think
yeah,
so many of the patterns of play, the
mm,
pressing
mm.
on the ball,
He didn't stop. He didn't
just couldn't
stop
be
still.
possible without him. Because I think Kwang last season was caught so often being the sort of number nine,
Mm,
the focal point, that it just put too much pressure on him.
mm,
But with Larson in this game, we played, I think on paper it said 4-4-2.
mm,
We can debate, how close to that it was. But I think Larson staying up top, being target man's quite a crude term, but being the target man,
mm,
having Kwang in sort of that free role, sort of as a
mm,
free striker, meant we could overload that left hand side because obviously you had Nuri, Gomez, and
mm.
Kwang. Obviously, we'll get onto the third goal, best pattern of play all
Yeah,
pre-season.
yeah.
Comes from Kwang leaving the post up top because Larson's got that locked down,
Mm,
comes deep, and then obviously that facilitates triangles, like you said.
mm. Yeah, let's talk about that third goal, because obviously I couldn't believe it happened. To be fair, it's one of those where I had to take a little bit of a step back and go, did Wolves just score that goal? Because like it was just an absolutely fantastic bit of play. I think there's like 14 touches from different players in one move until it ends up in the net. I mean, that is an absolutely phenomenal team goal. Starts with defend. It starts right from the back of the defense as well. And we'll talk about players in a minute, but it starts with Mascara. Mascara knows exactly what he wants to do. He wants to get it into the midfield as quick as possible, and that's what happens. He goes into the midfield, ends up wide with Neto and Semedo. Semedo and Neto link up really well. The ball actually nearly gets lost, but it finds its way into João Gomez with a bit of an intelligent bit of triangular play. João Gomez, as you said, has so much space to drift onto the other side and switch the play, because players like Strand Larsen have completely taken the centre backs out of the equation, because they're thinking, oh, he's just going to whip it into the big man and he's going to try and take it on. But João Gomez then has got absolutely acres of space to find Rodrigo Gomez. And what I love about this goal is the fact that Huang is so switched on. He knows exactly what Rodrigo Gomez is going to do. He
Yeah,
knows that Rodrigo Gomez is gonna do a one to one with him, and I mean, you could say that on paper, but how many times would you do that over and over again, and it just wouldn't come to be? But the amount of confidence it would take to try and pull something off like that. I know it's a pre-season and whatever, but you're a brand new player in Rodrigo Gomez. Huang, I mean, he's a fantastic player, but he has never been one of those players that's linked up in the middle like that. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And it just offered so much. So obviously you got Rodrigo Gomez, he's wide, plays into Huang. Huang plays it back into Rodrigo Gomez. The last triangle's complete, and then it's in off the post. And yeah, it's a fantastic goal. Yes, we're going to watch it back and forth like over and over and over again, which I'm sure we all have. But if we're doing something like that in the Premier League, it's going to be a lot harder, isn't it? You're probably going to get challenged a lot more. You're probably not going to get free as much. But you could actually argue you could do something like that in the Premier League if it's executed the way it was, because no one's defending that, because
no,
the ball's moving so fast. Players are switching left, right, and centre. You know, you completely overloaded the one side, and all of a sudden the switch is so quick from João Gomez. He sees Rodrigo Gomez, and they don't even know he's even there. They're covering Huang. Both of their centre backs are on Huang, and then the other centre backs on Strand Larsen, thinking they're going to thread it to him. So it's such a clever bit of play that I haven't seen Wolves perform before. I've not seen Wolves switch the play from an overloaded side to another side, and then bit of skill to get past some opposition and then finish that confidently. I just
yeah,
haven't seen that before.
yeah,
You could say maybe the Cardiff game when we came back up and it was between Raul and
Jota.
Jota.
Yeah,
But even then, that's still only really a small interplay in the attacking third. This is all the way back from Mascara, using your wing backs and your wingers, and then your centre midfield, and then your attacking third. It's just absolutely phenomenal.
yeah.
I
I think
honestly
we,
can't
yeah, yeah.
go on,
We
Ben.
did, yeah, we did see it a few times. I think the game we saw it the most times would probably be the Chelsea game last season when we won
Yeah.
4-2. There was obviously that really nice interplay with Ait Nouri at that one point. Um,
Mm.
I think it led to Cunha penalty. I'm not sure, but yeah,
Yeah.
I remember that's probably one good example. But I think Kwang is so important for that move just because he gets the ball, and you think normally he's quite rash. He's really calm in his finishing, but he could be quite rash in
Mm.
his sort of build-up play. But that classic chop that we've seen time and time again when he finishes,
Oh
obviously
yeah.
that game against Newcastle, he chops,
Mm.
defender falls over, scores. Does
Mm.
the exact same thing in build-up, sends the defender sort of flying,
Mm.
plays a really calm ball back to Gomez, like you said, and
Mm.
we score.
Mm.
I think, yeah, the only game I can remember last season where Kwang, his all-round game shone like in his absolute prime was against Brentford when we won 4-1, was it?
Yeah.
Um, I think he had to come off because of an injury,
Mm.
but that was prime Kwang, I think, in that game. And I
Mm.
think if we can get him fully fit in the right positions, like in this game, and we saw in terms of his finishing last season,
Mm.
I don't see any reason why he can't hit the heights of last season, if not more.
Yeah. Cool. So, talked about all the three games. Let's talk about standout players. So, I'll get started. I'll give us a player. We'll talk about it. We'll move on. For me, we're going to talk about the three brand new players. So let's talk about Pedro Lima. Um, honestly, I saw so much about Pedro Lima when we were linked to him because I try and do as much research as possible. And what I saw was just a player with no fear, running the channels, absolutely no problem at all. And being able to make decisions after making those runs. We've had players. I mean, I can't even count. I can count on like two hands how many players we've had that can get to a situation where we're in a decent situation, but when it comes to the final ball or the final pass or the final action, it's left with a bit of concern. Pedro Lima, I know it's only pre-season, but for an 18-year-old who's just turned 18, to make the runs that he did, to get into the amount of space that he was in. I mean, I was watching Lamine Yamal play for Spain, and if you watch a player that knows what he's doing, he's always got space in front of him. He's always looking in front of him, and he's got acres of space. And you always think, oh, that's probably a bit of coincidence towards that, but there's not. It's because he's found the place to receive the ball where there's no one in front of him. That is intelligence. And to have that amount of intelligence at 18 is scary. But then to put the technical ability on top of that as well, we've got an incredible player there. Ben, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely can see him getting a lot of minutes next season because obviously Nelson hasn't always been the best in terms of his injury record. Gets quite a lot of yellow cards as well, I think. So I think in terms of minutes, come 60th minute, chasing a game, Nelson's on a yellow card, he's injured, all these different scenarios. I think there's a player there that, when we first signed him, if you told me this 18-year-old kid from the Brazilian second league, would have the impact he's already had and has the potential to play, X amount of minutes in the Premier League, I would have laughed. Especially given the price, which, it's no small fee, especially for someone of his experience and age. But I think at the position we are now, I'm just so excited to see the impact he has. Because, like you said, playing without fear in the Premier League is such a big asset. Because, like you said, time and time again, we go down the wing, we get into a good position. And especially under Nuno, at times under Lopetegui, we just horseshoe it. We just pass it back, go to the other side, pass it back, and we just make this horseshoe shape. Whereas with him, he gets the ball and he's like, well, I've got the ball. I'm going to do something with it. And that's what we need next season. Like I said, whether it's we're chasing a game, we can't afford to keep passing it back. We need someone who's going to drive with the ball. It's quite a crude comparison with Adama Traore, but just the idea that every time Traore got the ball, the fans are on their seats. They expect
forward thinking players.
Yeah, and Lima is doing that from a deeper role, deeper position. Definitely someone I'm looking forward to watching.
Definitely. Cool. So do you want to mention a player and we'll talk about him, Ben?
Larson. I think, I've mentioned him quite a few times in the video already, but Larson for me I'd say he's probably the one I'm most excited for. Obviously, it's probably quite close between Gomez and Larson, but he's the one for me that will unlock our attack. I think the fact we're playing a 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1, you can argue about formations. The fact we've got someone leading the line with the press, someone who will unlock a Kwang, will unlock a Cunha, unlock a Neto. He's got everything. Like in terms of the West Ham goal, when he backheels it to Santi.
Oh, yeah.
In the Premier League, that's a Kwang or a Cunha or a
Palace, wasn't it, that one?
Palace, that's it, So that type of goal we saw time and time again with Kwang scoring that last season. That's going to happen so much more now when you've got a player with his vision to pick out runs, with the Cunha goal against West Ham, Santi against Palace. And it just, and then you've got Neto, obviously, whipping so many balls in. Like if we can keep him fit, 9 assists last season. If you watch Larson's sort highlight reel for Celta Vigo, you see so many headed goals in there, and
Mm.
that combination there just should scare
Yeah,
defenses, I think.
yeah, yeah. I mean, you've hit a few nails on the head there. What I was going to talk about was the fact that, like you said, like it allows other players to play their game. It allows players to play where we want them to play. We don't want Bellegarde to play out wide. We don't want Cunha to be annoying at all, to be honest, because he's better at coming deep from deep and driving us up the pitch, and then making those intelligent passes or getting into better spaces if he does come out onto the wings. And I think with players like Strand Larsen, and I think Guedes, if he stays as well, it'll give us that option to keep the players in the right places. Do you know what I mean? The amount of times as well we've had to utilize players like Neto to absolutely drive us up the pitch and then look up and then go, okay, who am I aiming at? The reason he gets so injured is because we relied so heavily on wing play. But with Strand Larsen and a number 10, you don't have to do that. That's why if you watch the game against RB Leipzig when Neto came on, he was explosive for the first action that he made, but every other action he didn't run because he didn't need to,
Yeah,
because he had players like Gomez coming further forward because the DM actually stayed back and did his job, and then you've got your 10, making it really awkward, like in Huang, because like we
yeah,
talked about earlier. So Neto won't get as injured if we play in this system, because he won't have to. We don't won't have to rely on wing play for every single action in a game,
yeah,
regardless of us chasing a game. That was the problem last season. We relied so heavily on running through the wings and using inverted wingers, and that's fantastic, but it will burn your wingers out fast. And that's what happened. And I think with a player like Strand Larsen, because that's who we're talking about, that'll actually help
yeah,
it help like nullify that as well.
yeah,
Us having to utilize the wings over and over and over and over again, going through the middle, trying new things. You got more to aim at, more to work with. I just think that's a really positive signing, and like you said, I'm very very excited for Strand Larsen and what he's going to bring to the table.
yeah. Well, with the one last thing on Larson, the sort of goal that I can expect us scoring a lot next season with Larson in the team was when we beat Bournemouth 2-1,
Mm,
I think,
mm,
when Sasha scored his winning goal.
mm,
But straight into the second half,
mm,
Neto sort of drives down the right, plays it
mm.
across the box for Cunha to
Yeah.
score that goal.
Mm,
Um, I think with a out and out number 9 occupying the centre backs like we've seen in the preseason games,
mm,
we score that goal more often. I think because if the
mm.
centre backs are occupied with Larson,
Yeah.
that frees up that sort of 10 role, that second striker position for Cunha to
Yeah.
just arrive late into the box, whether that's a
Yeah.
Quang back stick, a Quang front post, a Cunha in the 10 spot. We
Mm,
have options in terms of, we've mentioned it over and over again, taking shots early,
mm.
being there for rebounds. I think that Bournemouth goal is a template for a goal we'll see a lot next season, but we'll have to find out.
Cool. Next player is going to be Rodrigo Gomez. So I think this is probably one of the biggest surprises for me, because I think he went under the radar a little bit because he was the first one we signed out of the three. We then signed Pedro Lima and pretty much Strand Larsen near enough very close together. And I think those two signings became a little bit of a marquee signings, and he was kind of slightly forgotten about.
Yeah,
And then, I mean, what a way to introduce yourself. I mean, not only did he score 3 goals, but his ethic because he's not the fastest player. He's quick, but he's not the fastest player. But what he's really really good at is knowing when to use his speed. Because Neto's fantastic. Because what you'll watch, a good winger will stop and then use his speed, get past the player, stop again, use his speed, get past the player, and that's what I think Rodrigo Gomez does really well. He conserves his energy and gets himself into some situations. But to be able to do that in the first place, you've got to have confidence in your ability. And he just seems to ooze it. That's the thing with him. Like, he absolutely oozes confidence. And you can just see the joy as well. Like, the joy of the game that this kid's got is infectious. Like, I have a really, really good feeling about him. Like, the way, I mean, he's supposed to be playing on the right, but he doesn't. He plays on the left, which is really interesting because it gives him so many different things that he can do. Like, he can play inverted, so he can cut in more, or he can use his left foot to drill in a cross that they're not expecting. Or do you know what I mean? He's a very very versatile winger. Um, and I don't know, man. I think I'm as excited about him as I am for Strand Larson,
Yeah,
because I feel like if we do lose Neto, he's not as good as Neto, because Neto's just he's just world class. That's the problem with Neto. If we lose Neto, he's world class. Whereas Rodrigo Gomez, he's just finding his form and he's finding his feet and everything. But if preseason's got anything to do with it, mate, I am really really excited about Rodrigo Gomez. What do you think?
yeah. Well, I was sort of hitting all the. You've hit everything there, but I was reading an article. This I think it came out this morning on the Athletic.
Mm.
Um, that was sort of an interview with Gomez's manager at where was he last season? At Estoril, the
Yeah.
Estoril manager. Just the way he described him was, we didn't really have an option to play in that right wing back spot. And in
Mm.
terms of his directness, his ability to go sort of down the line, to come inside, his
Yeah.
work ethic just made him so suited to that role. And obviously,
Mm.
we might see it a few times this season, but I think he's got all the assets to be a top class Premier League winger. Just
Yeah.
his work rate, his attitude, like he approaches like every training session with a smile on his face. He's
Mm.
there, always going to give 110%.
Mm.
He gets the ball, he looks at the defender. Is he going to go down the line? Is he going to put a good
Mm.
ball in? Is he going to cut inside, do a shot?
Mm.
Who
His
knows?
link
Yeah,
up play is crazy as well. Like, the way he links up with players. Like, I've seen him link up with basically every winger we've got, um every attacker we've got. Basically, I've seen him link up with them. He's got confidence that he's going to receive the ball after a pass. Like, the way that he uses other players for a young kid is admirable, because I've seen so many times with in wingers, especially wingers seem to have this bit about them where they get the game in between the teeth and they just go for it, and they're a little bit of a bull in the china shop. Where I feel like he's got a bit of a calm head about him, where he can address a situation very fast in his mind. A little bit like Pedro Lima, to be fair. I think we've been really clever with these signings. They're young, but they're very like switched on with
mature.
the game.
Yeah,
Like, do you know what I mean? Must be an absolute dream for Gary to work with these players, because they seem to just they just seem to just gel so fast with this team. It's ridiculous how much they've gelled already.
yeah,
Like, we've had pre-seasons before where we've looked at players. Matheus Nunes, how long did it take Matheus Nunes to gel into the team? It took him ages, and then you could argue he probably didn't even really see the best of him. And then you've got what, like Fabio Silva. Fabio Silva. I mean, how many opportunities did he need? And we were always talking about his age. Oh, that's his age. It's his age. It's his age. But then you've got Pedro Lima, that's what shown more ability and desire I mean, yeah, okay, it's pre-season, but I could argue like, did Fabio even show any desire or passion or ability to the extent of Pedro Lima or Rodrigo Gomez, even in pre-season? Because I can't remember a game where he did, to be honest. I mean, like, I remember him scoring in one game where I think it might have been that game you were talking about earlier, wasn't it? Was it against I can't remember who it was against,
But
but
who's this?
we I think we
Fabio?
yeah we won 4-0, didn't we?
Ren?
Yeah, Ren, yeah.
You,
So
I can't remember if he scored in that game. Yeah.
yeah, I think Pedro. I think he did score. I think he scored the last one, and it was like, yeah, brilliant confidence booster and everything. But he didn't have like a game where you were like, oh my god, like this kid's gonna be the next best thing. So
Yeah. I think maybe the one game I could think maybe was the West Brom game when we
mm,
lost. I think we lost 3-2. He
mm,
scored the 2 goals. I think that in that game he was quite, yeah, you could see talent there, but I don't think we've
mm.
ever seen it on a consistent basis. And I
Not to
think
this level either. Not to this
no,
level. Not to the level of gelling with the team. That's what I'm trying to say. Like
yeah,
I've not seen him actually coincide with the team, and you go, yes, that's the guy. Whereas these players, I can be very safe in going, all right, if Gary wants to give these guys minutes, I want him to. Do you know what I mean? I actually want him to give these guys minutes.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, there are three new players. I think the one player we need to talk about is Guedes,
yeah,
because like we said earlier, we had no idea he was even going to play. We ended up knowing that, okay, he did go to the US, but it was mainly just because Podence couldn't. But I'd argue he'd probably go as well, because it just seems to it seems very different. Things seem different. I've not seen him post on his socials in a Wolves shirt for like, I don't even know how long, but like the other day he literally posted on his socials in a Wolves shirt with all the players and everything. It's just like these little things you can just see that he's interested. You know, he's running. He's coming back and helping if the ball needs, you know, any defensive work. Um, you know, he created essentially the one goal against West Ham, and like you said, he was very good against Palace. To be fair, so yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised with Guedes. When we first got Guedes, like I remember having him on FIFA, and he was like rated in his 80s, and I was like, oh my god, this kid's gonna be insane. I can't wait to get this guy. But he never really settled in. And I honestly think he was fed a little bit of bullshit, in my opinion. I think he was fed a little bit of bullshit from George Mendes. Um, and then ultimately when he found out, you know, what the situation was, where we probably aren't going to get Europe and we are going to be struggling this season, and I just don't think it was for him. Like, why would it be? Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
If you sold a lie, then ultimately you're going to be very pissed off when it doesn't actually come to be. And I think
yeah,
that's the difference this time. I think he's had an arm around him. I think Gary O'Neill's gone, you know what? Look, you're going to get game time because I've only got 1-9, and he's not going to play all the time because I don't want to get him injured. I've already seen how you were in pre-season. You know, why not give a season a try? You know, just give one season a try, see what the fans think and whatever. It's not like we got relegated and he's got shit football in the mist. He hasn't. He's got Premier League football. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah, yeah,
it's an attractive prospect for me. I think that he's happy in the group. From what I've been told, you know, he's very happy in the group. Getting involved with our new skipper, and yeah, I just think like there's a player there, and I think that I think we'd do well to keep hold of him. To be honest, which I never thought I'd ever say about Guedes,
yeah.
but there we go.
No, I totally agree. I think I'll caveat everything I'm about to say with when he came in, his attitude was quite poor. You know, he
Mm,
was throwing his arms around everywhere. He was not pressing as much.
mm,
But I feel like when he came in, it was the perfect storm for him to fail. Like he didn't
Mm.
have the platform.
No.
We had Bruno Lage as manager. That's a whole other discussion because
Mm.
I could go on for hours about Bruno Lage and his failings.
His man
Um,
management was
yeah,
dreadful.
but
Lost the dressing room.
when you come into the club and in your head you're going, okay, I'm a winger. We've just signed a striker. Here's Sasha Kalajic. He's going to be the striker. I'll play off him. Sasha obviously gets injured. Again,
Mm.
another conversation over poor recruitment. Um,
Mm.
but then you're thrust into the limelight. Okay, you're now my number 9. You have poor man management skills. He's playing up
Mm.
top,
Mm.
new league, big price tag. The fans obviously aren't going to give you the time to settle in with that kind of price tag. We saw it with
Mm.
Fabio. That's a different situation. But I just felt it was the perfect storm um, for it to go wrong. And obviously, he has his part in that. He
Mm.
stopped pressing. He sort of down tools somewhat. Obviously, then went out on loan. But I think the things that weren't his fault, you know, make the things that are his fault seem a lot worse, or at
Mm.
least in my head, I can sort of see his reasoning for being upset. Now,
Mm.
obviously, that never excuses what he did in his behaviour
Mm.
because the fans deserve so much more than that. They pay
Mm.
such high fees to watch their beloved team every single week, and for a player to do that
Mm.
is unacceptable. At the
Mm.
same time, I really want him to get a second shot at it because
Mm.
forget the financial side of things. In terms of the high wages, the high fee.
Mm.
He is a top player. You don't play
Mm.
for Valencia, PSG, multiple caps for Portugal,
Mm.
Villarreal. You don't play for those sorts of clubs unless you have talent. And we've seen
Mm.
it in sort of very small spells,
Mm.
well, barely for Wolves. But we saw it in pre-season, especially in that Palace game.
Mm.
He's a player I want around if he can fix his attitude, which we've seen positive signs of that happening.
Mm.
He's definitely someone I want in the squad.
Yeah, and I think we've seen attitude changes in players. I mean, you look at Lamina. I've been talking to Southampton fans about getting on the podcast, and during Southampton games, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll just talk about how you've got Lamina and he's an absolute prick and all this," and I'm like, "Really? Like,
Yeah,
how? Like, this guy's like one of the ambassadors for mental health, and he's our captain, and I've never seen him do anything as toward. Do you know what I mean? So if you're thinking, you know, if it's just an attitude thing, people can change,
yeah,
and we're fickle. We're very fickle, and we'll forget things very quickly. But one thing, obviously, what we want as fans is just to see a player enjoying playing for Wolves, a player doing his absolute best in his abilities, and if we get those two things, I'll forget about everything else because at the end of the day, he's had his loan spells, um, and he was happy enough to come back and train with the team, and he's been happy enough to help out Gary when Podence was injured to come to the USA. He didn't have to do any of these things, Ben. Like he could have literally just said nah.
yeah,
Because it's just extra, yeah, it's extra time and extra minutes and extra things in his legs and everything. But when you played that much as well, I mean, Gary played a lot. He played it, gave him a lot of minutes in pre-season.
Hmm.
It's going to be very interesting to see whether he plays many minutes at Molineux. That'll be the interesting one. If he plays many minutes at Molineux, I wouldn't be surprised to see him next season, Ben.
yeah. Well, I think obviously I was a bit caught off guard when we saw him in the Bristol game. I think we played. I think it was a 120-minute game, sort of half an hour quarters, and he
Mm,
played the first half an hour. And in my head, I just thought, it's a fitness thing. Like, obviously, I'm surprised he played, but I think it was more a fitness thing. But just sort of as pre-season went on, my
mm,
expectations changed because obviously, like you said, he played minutes here, played minutes there, and like you
mm,
say, if he turns up in front of a crowd at Molineux and
Mm,
plays the way he did against Palace, I
mm,
think, like you said, the fans will not soon forget, but it will taper sort of the previous view they had of him. So I think, like you said, if even if he comes on for say 15 minutes, I think any amount of time in front of that crowd can make a world of difference. You know, if he's chasing balls, if he's making runs,
mm.
like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he stays. But you know, that's all between him, the club, the manager. It's there's many
Yeah, yeah,
parts to it.
yeah. Right, cool. So the last player I want to talk about is Yerson Mosquera. Um, so these are obviously there's loads of players we could talk about during the preseason, but I think we talk about the ones that really are a little bit more of a surprise, really, to Wolves. I think another one I want to talk about very briefly before we get onto that actually is Kundal. I think that when he's been introduced, I actually think Kundal's done very well in midfield. Um, I think Kundal's done very well in midfield, and I think Chiquinho, when he's been needed on that left, has done very well as well. Um, but I just feel like those two players still need a little bit of polish to become Premier League ready, but they are very good options from the bench. Um, so that's my sort of 2 cents on those two players. So what do you think about those two? And then we'll talk about Yerson.
Yeah, I'll try and be as quick as possible. But Kundal for me, quite a crude comparison would be if you combined um, Gomez and Doyle in sort of the
Mm,
style, not necessarily the quality at all,
mm,
but we saw, I can't remember which game it was. Which game was it? I think it was the Palace game. There
mm.
were moments I watched him where he had sort of the Gomez sort of bulldog in him, in sort of,
Yeah,
he wasn't
winning the
scared to
ball,
go to ground, wasn't scared to get in for a tackle. But
mm.
then sort of his composure on the ball was quite Doyle-esque. Um,
Especially in the game against West Ham. I thought that his distribution was very good. He got the ball at his feet at times in very, very tight spaces, which I hadn't seen him do probably since we played Tottenham away in
yeah,
the Nuno days, where I thought, bloody hell, he's like the next Matinho. You know what I
yeah,
mean? That's how it felt like. So yeah, very impressive with Condor, and the other one was
Chiquinho.
Chiquinho. Yeah, what do you think about Chiquinho?
Yeah, I think he's definitely someone for me must stay in the squad. Now,
Mm,
will he get a lot of minutes? That's obviously down to him, the manager, how he performs. But when a player publicly declares in the way that he has that he wants to stay,
mm,
and it's not just a low quality academy player saying, I want to play for Wolves, but
yeah.
when a player that is coming off such a successful loan that he just has
Mm,
such obvious qualities which could be very useful to us next season, publicly
mm,
state, I want to be here. I like the manager. He's a great guy. Let me
mm.
play. For me, you have to reward that with a place in the squad because
Definitely, yeah.
if he stays and he doesn't play many minutes and then he gets loaned out, or perhaps he gets sold in January, or what that shows the rest of the squad is that Gary O'Neill's a man of his word. That it's a sort of,
Yeah.
you know, give me the right attitude, you'll play. Well, he's demonstrated the perfect attitude in every way. So for him
Mm,
to stay, even if he doesn't end up having a long term future at Wolves, really demonstrates Gary O'Neill's sort of ideals,
mm.
the way he approaches sort of squad management. For me, he has to stay.
I think Chiquinho for me reminds me of Neto. Like the way like he gets his head down and he just runs. He's quick. He's good. He's actually good with the ball at his feet. Like his feet are very very quick. He just needs polish. That's all it is with him. He just needs polish because I do see a really very quick, intelligent footballer there. He just needs a little bit of polish. It's like if you see Chiquinho next to Rodrigo Gomez, you'd go, okay, Rodrigo Gomez has had more time with Wolves, and he looks like the finished article. Chiquinho for me, he's just a little bit off Just a little bit though, not much.
Yeah,
Definitely worth keeping on the bench for me,
yeah,
especially like you get your cup games or whatever. Think like he's a perfect player to play in cup games. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
Which we struggled with last season. We couldn't go deep in the cup last season because we didn't have players like Chiquinho.
yeah. Yeah, we were forced to play. Obviously, we were forced to play Nuri on the wings at
Exactly,
times, and
exactly.
it's I think when was it? It was against who is it? I can't remember. But yeah, I remember when
I
we
mean,
had to play.
Coventry was the one,
Yeah,
weren't it?
Coventry. That's the game I'm thinking of. It just completely went out of my mind. But when we played Nuri on the left and
mm,
Bueno at left back at the end of the
mm,
game, it's
mm,
like if we had any other winger, they
yeah.
play because Nuri is his best position is left back
Mm,
without a shadow of a doubt, or left wing
mm,
back.
mm,
If we had someone like a Chiquinho, you know, when Bueno scores that goal, we're winning. Just
mm,
someone to chase the ball, just someone to
mm,
play into the corner, someone to chase down. We had
mm,
no pace on the wings, and I think Sarabia. I think I want him to stay. He's a good player, but when you're chasing a game, you look at your bench.
mm,
Obviously he was really impactful against Tottenham,
mm,
but for consistently coming off the bench and impacting games
mm,
in wide areas in the Premier League, I'd sooner pick Chiquinho than Sarabia
yeah.
personally, just in terms of profile. So I think,
Mm,
yeah, like you said, he has to stay.
yeah. Yeah, I think like you was just saying actually, I think we saw a little bit about him actually, Sarabia. Set up some good opportunities. I don't think he was massively great in the West Ham game. I think he was good from probably in the first half, and then sort of settled off in the second, and then had to be substituted.
Yeah.
But I do think actually against Leipzig, he had some really good moments where you saw the technical ability of him really shine. But yeah, we'll go into our last player because then we want to obviously just wrap the video up a little bit.
Yeah.
Yersa Mosquera, for me, an absolute lifesaver, in my opinion. Like you lose Kilman, and you're thinking, shit, I mean, we still do need a centre back, but I mean, the idea of having Yerson Mosquera and Totti as back two centre backs now, I have absolutely no fear at all. They proved it against a very good West Ham team. They proved it against a very, very good Champions League like Leipzig team. I honestly think that that's the two centre backs that we play, and Yerson Mosquera has so many positive qualities. Like he attacks the ball like no one. His pace is so much better. He doesn't get turned anywhere near as much as Kilman.
No.
His positioning is fantastic. He's great aerially. He scored goals. He scored loads of goals on his loan spells. I just think that is a very positive player. And what I really like about him is he fits Gary O'Neill's style of football like a glove.
Yeah, no, I
What do
totally agree. I think everything I said previously about Larson in terms of, being that player to link, just complete the attack, I would describe Yerson in the same breath in terms of all the problems we struggled with last season,
mm,
conceding sloppy set pieces, goals in behind, being,
mm,
the centre backs being too immobile to turn,
mm,
playing out from the back. Just all these things he fixes for me. I think one thing I want to bring up, sort of in conjunction with Yerson coming back, is the appointment of Jack Wilson, the new set piece coach
yeah.
from Man City. I think those two things in conjunction will mean we ship a lot less goals next season because I think
Mm,
when you've got an aggressive, tall, speedy centre back who's also mobile, during at set pieces, when you've got a coach whose specialist job is to tell players where to be,
Mm.
what runs to make, etc., etc., that will bring the best out of Yerson. And like you said in that Leipzig game, the big difference between Bentley's distribution in the Palace game to the Leipzig game was the fact that Totti and Yerson were mobile enough to go, okay, Bentley's got the ball here, let's move here. Or, okay, Lamina's got the ball here, let's move
They
there.
moved the line up, Ben, as well. The line,
Yeah,
the line just kept going forward and forward and forward, or back and back and back, and it kept happening over and over and over again, depending on what transition we were in the game and whatever. And I don't think that Dawson or Bueno are really quick enough to keep up the pace of that sort of play.
no,
The idea of it's very much how Tottenham play. If you look at how Tottenham play, they've got, you know, some very, very fast defenders. They've got Vicario as a sweeper. And when you've got that, you basically can afford your line to be further up, because you can get back quick enough to mop up any situations. We didn't have that with Kilman, and I don't get why West Ham have really bought him, because West Ham under Lopetegui, they want to have a high line. I know this for a fact. They want to have a high line, and Kilman does not give you that. Kilman is incredibly good in a back three when he's got some intelligence next to him, some experience next to him. He's a very good defender. You give him the reign of a centre back pairing with just anyone in a back four, you're gonna get punished, because he's not quick enough. If you play a flat back four, trying to think of a team like Leicester, for example, when they're coming back up, they're going to
yeah,
play a flat back four. If you play a flat back four, say if he went to Leicester and play next to Cody, he'd be awesome. But you can't play a player like that who's slow on the turn in this style of play. You will get punished
yeah,
constantly. Harry Maguire is exactly that style of player. Very, very good defender for England, because England don't have a fluid back line. They are very in when it comes to defending, they are a flat back four, and he's fine in that role. But if he went to, say, Spurs, or when United play, he's found out straight away. And that's
yeah,
what I'm trying to say. I know that we're going off topic a little bit, but that's why Yerson Mosquera and Totti are an absolute blessing
yeah,
for this Wolves team. If we can get one more pacey centre back with a little bit of experience, we're laughing, mate. We are
yeah.
laughing.
Yeah, I think one point on Yerson, which is downplayed, I think, a bit, is the fact that you can also play right back. And I'm not for a
Mm,
minute suggesting he'll play right back at all. Maybe
mm,
the odd minute, like when we're sitting deep in games, we're winning 1-0. Let's bring
mm.
Yerson on at right back. But I think
Yeah.
the fact that he's played right back for Villarreal, at the top level, for Colombia, I think a few times in friendlies. I just
Yep.
think the fact that he's comfortable enough receiving the ball in wider areas, you know,
Mm,
allows your players like Nelson, for example, in the same way that, with the hybrid system we played last season, Totti moved sort of into that left back space,
mm,
allowing Nuri to sort of advance. You can do
mm,
the exact same thing on the opposite side. So if we played, let's say we're playing a top side, we play a back three, we play Dawson in the middle, Totti on the left, Yerson on the right.
mm,
When you have Semedo bombing down that right hand side, you then can shift sort of the back line into that sort of back four where you've got Yerson on the right. And I think it
mm,
just allows so much tactical flexibility. Just the fact we've got, Gomez who can play wing back. I don't think
mm,
we'll see him there that many times. But, let's say we're winning games 1-0. Let's make a change. We put Yerson right back. We put Rodrigo Gomez, on the other side. And they
mm.
can form sort of that hybrid back five, which I think we will see a few times next season. But how many times we see it, can't say. But
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. So we've obviously gone over some of the players. How Wolves will play next season is basically very, very simple, guys. We're going to play a flat. We're going to play a back four. It's going to be a fluid back four that's going to move higher up the pitch in transition. We're going to play a DM further back who can drift in between in a defensive transition. We've got some right back and our left back are going to try and take it in turns to go forward. They're not going to both bomb forward. There's always going to be one that's going to cut back depending on who's gone forward. And then what that does, it just keeps you don't get stretched then. Our midfielders are very much going to try and win the ball as fast as possible, as high as possible. Then you've got your wingers who are either going to bomb forward and try and get involved in some wing play, or they're probably going to cut in 9 times out of 10, to be fair, and link in between whoever's playing further forward, whether that be Joe Gomez marauding forward, Cunha, or whoever's playing in the 10 role. And then you've got your standout number 9 to aim at any given point to give you a little bit of a someone to aim at, a bit of a target man. But what you're also going to get in him as well is his movement off the ball is going to create absolutely so many more chances for Wolves going next season. There's a few little things obviously that's going to give us some weaknesses when we play like this. It means that we've got to all press at the same time. It's no use just pressing, a couple of people press and then all of a sudden we're going to be absolutely onslaughted. So we all have to be on page all the time, pressed together. So it's going to be really, really tricky to keep and maintain that. And then I think the other side of the game, defensively, playing a back four, we have to make sure that we aren't marauding forward too much and getting caught out. We have to make sure that whoever's playing the DM role is coming back and helping out when it needs. And also our goalkeeper is sweeping and doing the right things, playing the ball around the back, because as much as you don't want it, Wolves fans, that's not going anywhere. The goalkeeper is still going to be playing around the back four and getting the ball up the pitch. The difference is this next season is that midfield is going to come back a little bit more in that transition to offer a little bit more going forward instead of having to play those suicide balls into midfield and getting us into all sorts of different trouble. And then obviously, like you were saying, Ben, as well, we'll be in a much better situation with a centerpiece coach as well. So you might see a lot more goals coming from centerpieces and probably less goals coming from centerpieces for an opposition as an opposition standpoint as well. What else, Ben? Do you want to add to how you think we'll line up and how we'll play?
I think you've mentioned a lot of different things, but I think the main sort of to bring up a Nuno-ism is we'll have a lot more solutions. I just think within the squad, as it stands, obviously Gary O'Neill's publicly said, some players may leave, might see some more players come in. I just think the squad as it stands has so many different profiles of player. Whether it's we've now got a Chiquinho, so we're not looking at the bench and going, we've got no wide sort of winger, like out and out wingers. We've only got Pablo. It's sort of the idea that okay, we're winning 1-0. Let's bring on someone who's good at keeping the ball. Let's bring on Pablo. Okay, we're losing 1-0. We need some width down the sort of down the line. Let's bring on Chiquinho. So I think it's just the idea that we've got more solutions, more options. Because we saw it time and time again that Gary O'Neill's not scared to change the system or to bring a completely different player on. I'm going to take this player off. Let's bring Sasha on. Or
he's very adaptable. To be fair,
yeah. So I think the fact that Gary O'Neill's got options, he's not forced to change things drastically by putting, an Nuri on the wing. He's now got a Chiquinho. So I think we'll see a lot more games that would have been marginal losses last season be turned into sort of draws, possibly wins this season, just purely based off the fact we've got more options.
Cool. All right, nice one. Well, Ben, that's been an awesome video. A little bit longer than we probably planned, but there was a lot to talk about. So if you like this style of video, guys, we're going to be obviously doing more of these in the season, reviewing different things. And it'd be awesome to have you have you along as well, Ben. I think you've really fit into the Wolfpack mold really, really well. Say some really, really intelligent things and just keep the chat really, really interesting. So from me, mate, thank you for joining us and getting involved. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
No worries, man. But yes, guys, please make sure you're liking the video, subscribing to the channel. If you're over on YouTube, if you're watching this on any other platform, to like the video, do what you need to do in any sort of regard. It really, really helps us going forward. I know I say that all the time, but it really, really does help know whether things that we're doing are the right things. Comment below as well. We've mentioned so much today in this video, so there's so much to talk about. So I really want to see you flood in those comments, making my job harder to reply to you all. Ben can reply as well. I also want to say as well, while we're on the subject of Ben also does all of the shorts. So if you've seen any of the shorts that were happening during the England games or whatever we were doing short wise, that was all Ben. So I'm assuming Ben's going to carry on doing those shorts and obviously helping on the YouTube channel as well. So really awesome to have him on board and everything. And hope you guys have enjoyed the video. Until then, guys, I've been Dan. That's been Ben, and we'll see you on the next one in a bit. We're out for blood.